What you are seeking is what is looking. What you are avoiding is what is found when the seeker disappears. The morning light filtered through ancient windows, casting shadows that danced without purpose across worn wooden floors. In this simple room, where dust motes suspended themselves in golden streams of sunlight, two figures sat facing each other. One had traveled far, carrying questions like heavy stones in his chest. The other remained still, embodying the answer that needed no words. The seeker shifted in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. His mind churned with anticipation, rehearsing the profound inquiries he had prepared during months of journey. Wu Hsin sat opposite him with eyes closed, breathing so quietly that life itself seemed to pause in reverence. The silence between them stretched like a taut string, vibrating with unspoken understanding. "Master Wu Hsin," the seeker began, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade through silk. "I have traveled across continents to understand the nature of silence. They say you teach through what remains unspoken." Wu Hsin's eyelids lifted slowly, revealing eyes that held no agenda, no desire to convince or convert. They were mirrors reflecting the seeker's own restless energy back to him. "You speak of silence, as if it were merchandise to be purchased at the end of a long journey. Tell me, during all those months of traveling here, where was this silence you seek?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples that disturbed the seeker's carefully constructed expectations. He had prepared for profound discourse, complex philosophical exchanges. This simple inquiry unraveled his readiness like a thread pulled from woven cloth. "I suppose, between my footsteps, between my thoughts perhaps. I'm not entirely certain I understand your meaning." Wu Hsin leaned forward slightly, not with urgency, but with the gentle attention one might give to a flower opening its petals. "Between your footsteps, between your breaths, between your thoughts seeking me out across all those miles? What was present in those spaces?" The seeker's brow furrowed as he searched his memory, sifting through recollections of dusty roads and sleepless nights. "Nothing, I suppose, just emptiness." A barely perceptible smile touched Wu Hsin's lips. "Ah, but you suppose. This supposing that fills the supposed emptiness. Does it remain quiet, or does it generate its own noise?" The question hung in the air like incense smoke, slowly permeating the seeker's consciousness. He felt something shift within him, a recognition dawning like sunrise through morning mist. "Yes, it chatters constantly. Even now, as I try to answer you, there's this commentary running through my mind." Wu Hsin nodded with the satisfaction of a gardener watching seeds sprout. "Then you have found what brought you here, the chatter that claims to seek silence, the noise that yearns for quiet. This is precisely what obscures what you already are." The seeker's hands gripped the arms of his chair as he felt the ground of his understanding begin to shift beneath him. "But surely there must be some method, some practice I can undertake to achieve this silence you speak of." Wu Hsin's eyes sparkled with gentle mischief. "You wish to employ noise to manufacture silence? You want the seeker to find what is already present when the seeker dissolves into its own seeking. Then what should I do?" The question escaped like steam from a kettle under pressure. "Who asks this question?" Wu Hsin's voice carried no trace of philosophy or spiritual authority. It was as natural as wind moving through leaves. "I do." The response came automatically, unexamined. "Show me this I that asks." Wu Hsin's hands remained folded in his lap, his posture unchanged, yet the request carried the weight of mountains. The seeker looked around the room, as if the answer might be hiding in the corners. He touched his chest, patted his head, gestured vaguely toward himself. Confusion clouded his features like weather obscuring a familiar landscape. It's here somewhere. I can't point to it exactly, but I know it exists. Wu Hsin rose from his chair with fluid grace and walked to the window. His movement was neither hurried nor deliberately slow. It simply unfolded as naturally as water flowing downhill. Cannot locate it, cannot grasp it, cannot define its boundaries, yet you maintain absolute certainty of its existence. This certainty about the uncertain, is this not worthy of examination? The seeker felt something loosening inside him, like a knot slowly coming undone. But I experience myself constantly. I think, I feel emotions. I'm sitting here conversing with you right now. Wu Hsin gazed out at the tree beyond the window, its branches swaying in a breeze that made no sound. Yes, experiencing unfolds continuously. Thoughts arise and dissolve like bubbles in champagne. Feelings emerge and fade like waves on an endless shore. But show me the experiencer standing apart from the experiencing. The seeker followed Wu Hsin's gaze to the tree, its leaves catching sunlight and releasing shadows in an eternal dance. Something in the quality of his looking began to shift, as if he was seeing with different eyes, or perhaps seeing without the assumption of eyes at all. Wu Hsin's voice came softly, almost as if he were speaking to the tree itself. When you perceive that tree, where does the boundary exist between the seeing and the seen? Where does the eye conclude and the tree commence? The question penetrated deeper than thought, touching something that had never been touched by concepts or explanations. The seeker felt his attention soften, expanding beyond the edges he had always assumed contained his vision. For a moment, the rigid separation between observer and observed seemed to waver like heat shimmer on summer pavement. I think I'm beginning to see there's no clear separation, he whispered, almost afraid to speak louder, lest he disturb whatever was revealing itself. Wu Hsin returned to his chair, settling into stillness like a leaf coming to rest on calm water. Thinking will not serve you here. Thinking is like attempting to bite your own teeth. The one who thinks cannot step outside the thinking to observe it objectively. The seeker felt frustration building like pressure in a sealed container. Then how do I understand? How do I grasp what you're pointing toward? Wu Hsin closed his eyes for a long moment, and in that silence, something profound communicated itself without words. When he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of emptiness itself. Understanding is not an activity you perform. It is what you are when the attempt to understand ceases its efforts. To you, the silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but the presence of something far more substantial than noise could ever be. Wu Hsin sat motionless, eyes closed, and in his stillness, a teaching transmitted itself that no words could contain. In the space between my words right now, what instruction is being offered? Wu Hsin's question emerged from the silence like a flower blooming from seemingly barren ground. The seeker found himself listening not to the words, but to what the words arose from. In that listening, something shifted fundamentally. The urgent need to understand began to dissolve like salt in water, leaving behind a clarity that had always been present but never acknowledged. This silence that requires no technique, that seeks no seeker, that needs no validation. This is the most eloquent teaching available. It speaks of what you are before you learn to divide yourself into teacher and student, seeker and sought. The seeker's breathing deepened as something settled within him. But how do I live from this understanding? How do I integrate this into my daily existence? Wu Hsin opened his eyes, and in them was reflected not knowledge, but the absence of the need for knowledge. You cannot live from it because it is what you are. The wave cannot live from the ocean. The wave is the ocean temporarily appearing as wave motion. The seeker shook his head, feeling caught in a maze of contradictions. Master, I feel like I'm moving in circles. First you indicate there's nothing to do, then you point me toward something, then you suggest there's no one to point toward anything. A gentle chuckle emerged from Wu Hsin, like water trickling over stones. Yes, this is the pathless path. Every step forward becomes a step backward. Every understanding reveals itself as misunderstanding. Every arrival is simultaneously a departure. This is maddening! The seeker's frustration burst forth like water breaking through a dam. Wu Hsin's eyes brightened with something that might have been delight. Excellent. When the mind that demands understanding goes mad, sanity appears naturally. This sanity requires no understanding because it exists prior to the one who would understand. Wu Hsin extended his hand, palm upward, in a gesture so simple it seemed to contain all possible teachings. Do you see this hand? Yes. Wu Hsin slowly closed his fingers, forming a fist. Now do you see it? I see your fist. The hand opened again, fingers uncurling like petals in morning light. The hand was always present. The fist was the hand temporarily appearing as something else. The open hand, the closed hand, both are temporary appearances of what remains constant. Something clicked into place within the seeker's understanding, like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. The hand itself. Before you learned the word hand, the seeker sat in contemplative silence, feeling questions becoming quieter, dissolving into the space from which they had emerged. The urgent need to know was being replaced by something more fundamental, a recognition of what had always been present. Something is shifting, he said softly. The questions are becoming quieter. Wu Hsin leaned forward slightly, not with interest, but with the natural attention that emptiness gives to its own movements. When questions become quiet, what remains? The seeker looked around the room, but his looking had changed. It was no longer searching, no longer trying to grasp or understand. It was simply present to what was already here. Just this, whatever this is. Wu Hsin nodded like a branch swaying in breeze. Yes, this that requires no name, no explanation, no seeker to discover it. This that is so obvious it gets overlooked, so present it gets ignored, so simple it gets complicated by the mind that would possess it. The silence that followed was pregnant with understanding that had nothing to do with concepts or knowledge. It was the silence of recognition, of coming home to what had never been left. Wu Hsin's voice emerged from this silence like echo from a great canyon. The most eloquent teaching is the one that renders all teaching unnecessary. When the teaching succeeds completely, both teacher and student disappear into what they always were. And what is that? The seeker's question was barely a whisper. Wu Hsin closed his eyes and sat in perfect stillness before answering. This silence, speaking through apparent forms, this stillness dancing as movement, this peace appearing as seeking until the seeking finds its own source. And the room filled with a presence that was neither silence nor sound, but the source from which both emerged. Wu Hsin sat motionless, eyes closed, embodying the teaching that could not be spoken. "Master?" the seeker whispered after some time had passed. No response came. Wu Hsin remained in perfect stillness, like a mountain that has forgotten it was ever anything but mountain. Understanding dawned in the seeker like sunrise over water. The teaching was continuing, had never stopped, would never need to stop. In Wu Hsin's silence, all possible teachings were being transmitted. "The teaching continues," the seeker whispered, his voice filled with wonder at the simplicity of what was revealing itself. Both figures sat in silence as the light gradually changed, painting new patterns on walls that had witnessed countless such revelations. Time seemed to slow, then stop, then reveal itself as the movement within stillness. When the seeker finally opened his eyes, something fundamental had shifted. The weight of seeking had lifted like morning mist, evaporating in sunlight. There was never anyone to teach or be taught. Wu Hsin opened his eyes slowly, and in them was reflected the seeker's own true nature, not as concept or philosophy, but as living reality. A smile touched his lips without disturbing the profound stillness that surrounded him. When the seeker dissolves, what was sought is revealed to have never been absent. This is the eloquence of silence. It speaks of what is always present, but never proclaimed. The seeker rose from his chair, his movement natural and unhurried. He bowed deeply, not to Wu Hsin, but to what Wu Hsin represented, the mirror in which his own true nature had been recognized. "Thank you for showing me what cannot be shown." Wu Hsin's voice was barely audible, like wind through distant trees. "There was never anyone here to show anything. What you are thanking is your own true nature reflected back to itself." The seeker walked toward the door, his footsteps light as if he were walking on air. At the threshold, he paused and turned back. "Will I see you again?" Wu Hsin's final words hung in the air, like the last note of a song that would echo forever. "How can you not see what you are?" As the seeker disappeared through the doorway, Wu Hsin remained sitting in the gradually dimming light, a slight smile playing on his lips. The teaching that had never begun would never end, continuing its eloquent silence through all apparent forms and formlessness. "And the silence speaks on," he whispered to the empty room, though emptiness itself was listening with the ears of fullness, and silence was speaking with the voice of all possible words.